Since the release of Deltarune Chapter 2 this September, Deltarune hype has been everywhere, unceasing, unavoidable, and I am no exception to this. So here I am, trying something different. Yep, that's right, I'm doing a video game theory video. I hear they're all the rage these days. Worse, I am about to do something I actively dislike and make some predictions. I'm going to take you step by step through the locations of Hometown and give my thoughts on how likely each one is for another Dark Fountain to show up, based on narrative tropes and as much analysis as I can muster. Which isn't much, let me tell you, I am no good at predicting things, but it'll be fun, right? That's what we're here for. But first, before we get started, spoiler warning. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this video is going to assume that you have already played and beaten Chapter 2 of Deltarune. This is not a game you want to have spoiled for yourself. If you haven't seen to the end of the chapter, pause this video now and go play the darn game. I will wait for you. Okay, everybody on the same page now? Alright, here we go. We begin our predictions in perhaps the most obvious place. TORIEL'S house, or your house, or Chris's house, whatever you want to call it. Yes, at the end of Chapter 2, it seems that Chris has opened a dark fountain right in the middle of their own living room, subjecting Susie and Toriel to whatever no doubt upholstery-themed dark world they will all end up in. But as much as I'm looking forward to conversing with Cheriel, I have to say, I can't call this a sure thing. If that sounds ridiculous, if you're thinking, wait, Chapter 3 is most certainly going to involve a Toriel dark world, well, think back to the end of Chapter 1 and how it related to the beginning of Chapter 2. It seemed for sure like something sinister was going to occur. Chris removed your control over them, they got a knife, they had that super evil expression, and it almost sounded like they were gonna kill Toriel. Like, wow. And yet it turned out to be the setup for a joke. Toby Fox is here to troll the crap out of us, friends and neighbors. Whatever expectations we may build up, they are going to get subverted at every opportunity. So I find it entirely possible that Chapter 3 will open not in an instant dark world, but with someone complaining about the smoke and trying to open a window or some other kind of fake-out resolution. And if you think that's just wild speculation, also consider the other two things Chris does at the end of Chapter 2. First, we have slashing the van's tires. Now, I have been puzzling over this for months, and I am still no closer to figuring out its significance. And yet it must be significant, or why else would it have happened? Let me know in the comments what you think. Second, before making the fountain, Chris opened the front door of the house. This is also significant, though how or why we can't quite tell just yet. All I do know is that previous Dark Worlds have taken place in single enclosed rooms. Could opening the door mean that all that dark energy is going to escape, turning tomorrow's festival or even the entirety of Hometown into a giant dark world all its own? I mean, yeah, it's definitely possible. The carnival's been mentioned far too many times in Chapter 2 for it to not actually be important. And if that's the case, well, this video is going to look really stupid in hindsight. So let's discount the possibility for the sake of argument. Still, even with all that in mind, I would say that Toriel's house is still a pretty likely location for a fountain, whether in Chapter 3 or maybe even later. Never using it would just be a hell of a thing to fake out the audience with. So, since Toriel lives at the northernmost tip of Hometown, let's just travel south, shall we? Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see Noelle's house at some point. We have to. We have to meet her mom, who's going to be serious and overbearing and just completely awful. We have to help Noelle get through her mommy issues. We have to find out what the hell happened to Des. And what better way to solve the Holiday family's problems than taking a trip to a wintry hellscape, courtesy of someone, maybe even Noelle herself, opening a dark fountain in Hometown's ritziest domicile. Seriously, there can't be a giant gate cutting off the edge of a map without whatever lies beyond being significant. We're gonna see Noelle's house, and there's almost assuredly going to be a dark world in it. I rate this one very possible and highly likely. I'm gonna lump all three of these houses together because the answer for two of them is definitely not. Caddy with a Y, Caddy with an I, and Bratty with a B are not so far important enough to the story of Deltarune to merit seeing inside their houses. They're mostly just Undertale cameos, and I don't expect they'll continue to be anything more than that. And if any of them did end up in a dark world, it'd be somewhere else in town. That said, I won't completely discount the idea of a dark fountain happening in Napstablook's house. I mean, the likelihood is low, but given that we've already had interactions with Mad Dummy and Metaton through the door, and Napstablook in the flesh, sheet, ectoplasm? Whatever. I'd say there's a solid chance they'll become more relevant to the general overworld story as time goes on, and a ghostly dark world might not be far behind. Does it really bug anyone else that you can't go to your dad's shop in Chapter 2? Like, why, Dad? Come on, it's us. Let us in. We definitely will not stab you in your sleep. Anyway, if I were rating this on a scale of how likely I think a location is for a future Dark Fountain, I'd give Flower King a 10 out of 10. How could it not be? He's got 7 rainbow flowers arranged in an arc upstairs. There's so much stuff to interact with, so many interesting things to look at, and a ready-made floral theme to build a dark world around. Asgore's already inserted himself into the Light World story, so why should it be any different with the Dark World? Look forward to Chris vs. Daddy issues coming soon to a Deltarune near you. Well, obviously I don't mean the lake itself, see previous comment about Dark Worlds being contained, but given Onion-san's presence in the lake and the way they've been doling out information piece by piece to us so far, I wouldn't be surprised if there were an island or an opposite shore we could get to later in the game. Maybe an underwater ruin? I wouldn't put it past Toby. Just anywhere that Onion-san could take you would work. Or if you haven't befriended them, maybe you could build a bridge or get a boat ride, maybe from a certain cloaked ferryman? Anyway, I don't know what could be on the other side of the water, but whatever it is, if it exists, there's a good chance it would be a Dark World entrance in a future chapter. That said, I'd give it maybe a 50-50 odds on being possible, with a high likelihood for fountainage if something like this does exist. We'll have to see. I'm of two minds about both of the restaurants on Hometown's 2nd Street. On the one hand, they have a lot of the so far unspoken criteria that I've been using to evaluate the places on this list. They both have strong themes around which a world could be built. They have lots of things you can see and interact with which could be used to populate said world. And they have people in them with strong personalities whose stories you could potentially see unfold in the Dark World, as we did with Noelle and Birdley in Chapter 2. That said, they almost have too many people, QC's especially. I think a Dark World place there would be way too busy to be worth the effort. The story would get bogged down as you tried to help and or save all those people. For all that I'd like to see more about Chris's relationship with Caddy with an I don't know that QC's is the right setting for it. And Icy's is, let's face it, a little too ridiculous. I mean, Burger Pants is there, though maybe that's a point in its favor, hard to say. Either way, I'm putting them both on the possible but not very likely list. Time for another 2-for-1 special. We've seen SANS'S business now, and we're assuredly going to see the inside of his house after Papyrus makes his triumphant Deltarune debut in, hopefully, Chapter 3, which I am definitely looking forward to. But are either of them going to be locations for a Dark Fountain? No. And it's for one simple reason. That would be giving Undertale fans what they want. Toby Fox and Deltarune are not here to give people what they want, they are here to give us what we need. That said, I could see Papyrus having a Dark World adventure with Chris from another location. Maybe. But not Sans. He's just going to be around to make jokes about befriending your mom and not knowing how to run a grocery store. And quite honestly, that's all I really ask of him. Sans' place gets a somewhat possible and a really not likely. I'm mostly including these for the sake of thoroughness. I don't see the various apartment buildings as being important enough to even merit us going inside eventually, let alone produce a Dark World. I mean, who lives there? Snowy? Monster Kid? Minor characters at best. Potential Dark World sidekicks in the future? Perhaps kinda maybe, but again, they're not important enough to warrant a full-on adventure. This is really neither likely nor possible. So if we disregard the thing I said earlier about needing enclosed rooms, I could actually kind of see the alleyway as a potential Dark World hotspot. Like, it's sketchy, but it's there. You've got flowers and trash cans, you've got keen graffiti, you've got milk in a bowl. And like, does Alphys live there or something? We saw Bratty there this time, but she has a house. Alphys does not. Is she but a lonely gutter snipe, a desperate weeb just barely holding on to her sanity as she struggles to make ends meet with a job she's too timid and spineless to be effective at? Well, yeah, and it certainly seems like the characters have so far been placed to keep us from getting to the back of the alley, which is highly suspicious. But on the other hand, I was going to put the police station in the probably not category, except that I just realized it could totally be the centerpiece of the chapter where Alphys and Undyne realize their love is true and good and pure and will last the test of time. And, I mean, I guess we could also learn what happened to Asgore to get him kicked off the Force, but who cares about that when we could have fish lizard kissies? We'll put this in the solid maybe category. Also, what's up with that blocked road off to the left of the station? Just what is Undyne hiding? It's a prime spot for a previously unknown locale to suddenly be unveiled in a future chapter. Just saying. It might be a little on the nose so bright to throw a dark fountain in the hospital just so we can hang out with Noelle's old man for a while, but I can't help but feel like the hospital is the perfect place for one. It's just got so much going for it. Between the medical theme, the creepy receptionist, any random person could be remanded to the right-hand care unit, and of course there's good old Rudy. That said, for all I think it's a good fit, do I think it's likely for the hospital to play host to a dark world? Not really, if I'm being honest. I'd call it maybe possible, but not very likely. I mean, if that happened, and you did all get sucked into a dark world, Rudy might just not make it. Okay, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. There's 4 rooms in the school, and there's already been a dark fountain opened from one of them. Alphys's classroom is maybe a little bare to host a good dark world, but the kindergarten room Toriel teaches in isn't. I mean, you could finally get your reckoning with the throne of the gods. Just think, a whole chapter dedicated to pondering the extent of man's hubris. It would be glorious. No, but really, there's an entire classroom that we have yet to be let inside after 2 chapters, and I must know what is in there. I think a return to the school is entirely possible, though probably not very likely for a dark world, but it's still more likely than a return to the library, which is why I haven't included it in this list. As gung-ho as I am about Noelle's house being a location for a dark fountain, it's probably significantly more realistic to say that, while we'll definitely get to visit it one day, the fountain is more likely to appear in the town hall. That way we can still get to interact with Mayor Holiday, but more on her terms, possibly even without Noelle in the picture. It'd be a good scaffolding for painting her as a villain, or even as someone torn between 2 bad choices, struggling to do what she thinks is right by the town while wondering if maybe she shouldn't be a more attentive mother. Is it very likely though? Maybe. Strong maybe. Yeah, I could see it. Okay, if you take one thing away from this video, it is this prediction. The church will absolutely be the location of a dark fountain in a future chapter. Maybe not chapter 3, maybe not even chapter 4, but all signs point to it being a major locale. I mean, Gerson Boom is all over this game already. You can't walk 2 feet through town without someone or something mentioning him. Plus we know a Mrs. Boom runs, or at least works at, the library. And now here's his son, the pastor of the local church, having 2 minor but very prominent interactions with the main characters over the first 2 chapters of the game. He's one of the most colorful and obvious NPCs in Hometown, one who isn't an Undertale cameo, and whose story we know very little of at this point. We're gonna be finding it out sometime in the future. Add in how important religion and religious iconography have been in both Deltarune and Undertale, and there's no way we're not gonna have to help Alvin deal with shouldering the burdens his father has left on him. It's a story I am very much looking forward to. The church is both highly possible and highly likely, in my opinion, as a location for a dark fountain. And yet, this is somehow only the location that I am second most sure about. In a letter to Alexander Semenovich Lazarev, modern author and playwright Anton Chekhov once wrote, "One must never place a loaded rifle on the stage if it isn't going to go off. It's wrong to make promises you don't mean to keep." From this missive, we get the phrase Chekhov's gun, defined by Wikipedia as a dramatic principle that states that every element in a story must be necessary and irrelevant elements should be removed. The phrase is also used to describe those elements themselves. In case you weren't paying attention, I have been talking about Chekhov's guns throughout this entire video. The slashed tires, the gate and police tape blocking off the western portions of Hometown, mentions of the festival and going to church, Papyrus's absence, the open door. These are all Chekhov's guns. All promises that Toby Fox has made to us that these disparate hints are all going to pay off later on in the story. And of all the Chekhov's guns in Deltarune, the bunker is the biggest, glowingest one. I'm pretty sure I'm telling you nothing you haven't already figured out for yourself when I say there's definitely going to be some Dark World shenanigans happening there eventually. I rate it both extremely possible and so likely that it may as well have already happened. I mean, what else could it be for? Unless it's where the kids hid Dessa's body or something. Please don't let it be where the kids hid Dessa's body. Ho, I bet you thought I was done. No siree, I've got one more weird theory in my pants hole, and that is that we could stumble across a dark fountain somewhere that couldn't even be captured in a playthrough. I'm not just talking about locations outside of hometown like what's beyond the lake or the block street. I mean some kind of liminal, metafictional, fourth wall breaking space where the conflict is between we the players and Chris. This would almost assuredly be your Chapter 7 finale, and it would probably be completely mind-blowing. Do I think it's likely? Yeah, honestly I do. Maybe not the highest likelihood out of all of these, but definitely a possibility that should be considered. I can't think of a better way to approach the player versus avatar struggle that's been laid out in this game than by completely breaking the game world, and that means a tripped out dark world filled with our worst fears about ourselves. Won't that be fun? And that's it, my completely off-the-wall ideas about where dark fountains might be located in future chapters of Deltarune. How'd I do? Leave a comment if you think you can make predictions better than me, because let's face it, I am no real authority on Deltarune or Undertale, and you probably can. Also be sure to leave a like if you like this video, because yes, I am self-promoting at the end of the video, because that is what one does, my dear. Don't feel pressured to subscribe though, certainly not if you want to see more videos like this one, because I don't expect to make any more, really. I mean, if you like ponies, or watching people play card games, or eat food, maybe sub and hit the old bell, but if this is all you came for, go in peace. Be free, my child. The guilt shall not touch you in this life. Thank you for watching.